Welcome to this remote meeting of the Pension Fund Committee taking place on the 3rd of December 2020, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage of the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I am Councillor Mark Davidson and I will be chairing today's meeting. I would like to welcome members, officers and any other members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Before I commence the formal business of the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. All participants must please mute your microphone. To speak, use the chat function on the right-hand side. Type RTS, which is request to speak. Remember, everyone in the meeting can see messages in the chat function. When invited to speak by me as the chair, please remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position, unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and just use the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. Some members may find Teams has been updated and the buttons are now in the top corner instead of in the centre of the screen. If my connection is lost, the Vice Chair, Owen Temple, will take over until my connection is restored. We'll move on to the agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence, Jill?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Joanne Carr, Colin Carr and Marion Wilson, and also Scheme Member Representative Anne Delandra.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest from anybody? It doesn't seem like it, but if anybody thinks of one during the meeting, if they could let us know, please. So we've got item number 3, which are minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of September 2020. Has anybody got any comments on the minutes? If you have, can you type into the RTS function? Or alternatively, can we have a mover and a seconder for the minutes, please?
I'll move them, Chairman. John Shuttleworth.
Thanks, John. Do we have a seconder?
Second them.
Thanks, Jim. Everybody happy to agree? And nobody's saying no, so it sounds like it. We move on to item number 4, Pension Fund Committee training. Can I hand over to Paul Cooper to take us through this one, please, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I'm Paul Cooper, Pensions Manager at Durham County Council. The purpose of the report is to record in the public domain the training that has been undertaken by committee members since the last formal meeting of the committee. Paragraph 6 begins to outline the training that's been undertaken. On the 22nd of October, the committee convened in a training session and considered a range of issues. These included Border Coast's global property and UK property offerings, Border Coast's multi-asset credit, Border Coast sterling index-linked bonds transition, an update from officers on the services provided by the pension fund to scheme members and participating employers, an update on the progress of statement of accounts, legislative updates on things like the public sector exit cap and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government's further reforms to the LGPS. Additionally, the annual meeting of the pension fund was held on the 5th of November. Again, members were able to consider the annual report 2019 to 20, an annual update on the LGPS, including detail on legislative updates to the scheme, an annual update from our pooling manager, Border Coast, an annual markets update and investment management update from Mercer, as well as a detailed update on the valuation position and funding update from the fund's actuary. Additionally, since the annual meeting, a further training session was held on the 27th of November, designed to assist members of the committee with decisions made to today's committee, specifically in respect of Border Coast's multi-asset credit subfund and the adoption of Border Coast's responsible investment policy. Members of the committee are asked to note the report.
Thanks for that, Paul. Does anybody have any questions? I can't see any RTSs. Are we happy to note the report if nobody has any questions?
Agreed.
It looks like it. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the overall value of the pension fund investments to the 30th of September 2020. This is item number 5. Beverly.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Beverly White. I'm the Finance Manager responsible for revenue, pensions and technical accounting. So this report provides members with a quarterly update on the information on the overall value of the pension fund at the 30th of September 2020 and the fund's cash position at the same date. The total value of the pension fund was £3.143 billion at the end of September, which is an increase of £32 million or 1% when compared to the value held at the end of June of £3.112 billion. So Appendix 1 to the report provides a backward-looking cash position showing the actual cash balance against our forecasts at the time for each of the last 4 quarters. Cash held internally by the pension fund bank account was £38 million at the 30th of September. And in addition to that, we also have access to cash held by fund managers if we need it, which totalled £46 million at that time. During this last quarter, we transferred just over £3 million to Border to Coast for investing in private equity, infrastructure and private credit. Appendix 2 of the report provides the forward-looking cash flow forecast for the next 5 quarters, taking us up to the 31st of December 2021. This forecast is based upon the main assumptions as set out in the report's paragraph 14. And in line with these assumptions, the quarterly payments to be made to pensioners and creditors are expected to be higher again than the contributions receivable for employees and employers, with the net cash outflow forecast to range between £9 million and £11 million in each quarter. So in order to maintain our working cash position, further cash flow withdrawals of £20 million from fund managers have been factored into the forecast in quarters 2 and 4. I would like to reassure members that officers regularly even monitor the bank balance to ensure there's sufficient cash available to pay our pensioners and creditors on time. I would just ask members to note the contents of this report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Beverly. Do we have anyone wanting to comment on this report?
Move the report, Chairman. John Shuttleworth.
Thanks, John. So we're happy to note the report, everybody. Yeah.
Yes.
Magic, thank you. We'll move on to item number 6. Performance measurement of the pension fund investments to the 30th of September 2020. It's Beverly again.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is the quarterly update report produced by the fund's custodian. It summarises the fund manager's investment performance to the 30th of September 2020. So although the value of the fund increased in the quarter, the custodian's report shows that overall the fund managers underperformed the target we set them by 0.89% in the quarter and by 3.83% in the year to date. More detail on individual fund manager performance will be presented by the fund's investment advisors in Part B of today's agenda and can also be found in the manager's reports in Part B. I'd ask members to note the report, please. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Beverly. Does anybody have any questions on this one? Any queries? Or are we happy to note the report?
Happy to note the report, Chairman.
That was confident. So we're happy to note the report. So move on to item number 7. The internal audit progress report to the 30th September 2020. Paul Monaghan. Paul.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Audit Manager for Durham County Council. So this is the Quarter 2 progress report for 2020-21. The table in paragraph 6 shows the status of each review as at the end of September. The 2 final reports were issued in the period, and these were for the reviews of payroll and bank reconciliation. And both of these audits got a substantial level of assurance.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 9, which is the internal audit progress report to the 30th of September 2020. Paul Monaghan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Paul Monaghan, Audit Manager for the Durham County Council. This is the Q2 progress report for 2020-21. The table in paragraph 6 shows the status of each review as at the end of September. So there was 2 final reports issued in the period. These were for the reviews of payroll and bank reconciliation, and both of these were given a substantial level of assurance. So members are asked to note the work undertaken by internal audit up to the end of September 2020. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you,
Move the
Paul.
report, Chairman.
Ooh, that was a sharp thing. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 8, the audit completion report. It's from Mazars. It's Daniel. Can we have your report, please, Daniel?
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Daniel Ray from Mazars, the external auditors. The report I have on the agenda today is our audit completion report as it was presented to the audit committee in September. So I thought it'd be easiest just to present the exact same report and then give a verbal update on areas that have changed since we presented it in September. So just to give a high-level overview of each section, Section 1 sets out our responsibilities as the external auditors. So we issue an opinion on whether the financial statements are true and fair. We issue a consistency report on whether the financial statements in the pension fund's annual report are consistent with the pension fund financial statements within the main council accounts. And then we also have to respond to any elector or anybody else who raises objections, but that's very rare and we didn't have any this year. The next part of Section 1 gives the status of some areas of work that were outstanding at the time we presented this in September, but all 3 of those areas that are shown as outstanding were since concluded with no further issues arising. That page also sets out our basis for the materiality level that we used when we were carrying out our audit work. On to Section 2, this just shows the significant risks that we had when we planned and carried out our audit work. The first significant risk is management override, and this is a significant risk in every audit on any entity in the world. It's nothing specific to the pension fund itself, and it just recognises that management are in a position potentially to override any controls that are in place just due to the authority that they have. So we carried out our audit work as set out there and we didn't find any issues. The next significant risk on the next page is the valuation of unquoted investments, and this is just due to there being a greater degree of subjectivity and judgment involved in valuing these investments, and you'll tend to find this as a significant risk on the audit of any entity that has a material level of unquoted investments. And again, we carried out the audit work and then we didn't find any material errors or anything like that. The next page on Section 2 just sets out some significant matters during the year. We've mentioned COVID-19 and the difficulties that were caused by COVID-19 in several aspects, but we still managed to complete the audit as planned, and we mentioned there that we had full cooperation from the finance team. So I'd like to thank again Beverly and the rest of the finance team for the help during that audit. Section 3 sets out our internal control recommendations. So these are areas where they're not necessarily having a financial implication, but it's just areas where during our audit work we've identified, sort of things that could be amended or improved in terms of practices in place. The first one was something identified during our IT audit work. So with the pension fund using the council's IT systems, the IT work was carried out for both the council and the pension fund as one piece of work. So the first recommendation was identified from that work. And then the next recommendation was sort of a very minor one, just about the completion of declarations of interest by members. Then the next page on Section 3 sets out a follow-up of the recommendations that were raised in the previous year. One of them we found to have been resolved, nothing arising in relation to that again. And then the second one again was in relation to the IT audit work, and we found that the same matters were in place. So it's just been pointed out that the matter still remains relevant. In Section 4, we have our summary of misstatements, and we only have one in there. So again, this was in relation to the level 3 investments. So it's just due to the nature of investments. As I said, these investments have a great deal of judgment and subjectivity involved. So when we've done our own work to see what the value of these investments could be, we've found a slight difference. It's not material, but it's above our reporting threshold. And we tend to have this in every year, and it can be as simple as, some of that difference will just be due to the fact that we might have used a slightly different exchange rate to what's being used at the year end. Then the next section of section 4 just outlines some of the disclosure amendments that were made. There's nothing significant in there at all. Then the appendices are the draft reports and management letter that we anticipated having as at the time of presenting this report. And I think I'm right in saying that the final reports that have since been signed aren't any different to these. If they are, there'll be cosmetic differences, nothing significant. So the reports that are in Appendix B and Appendix C are the final signed versions that are in the accounts. And Mark, the audit partner, he signed off those opinions on the 30th of October. So that was when our audit work was concluded. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on those.
Thanks, Daniel. Does anybody have any questions for Daniel? I've sort of got a question. What happened when it went? Oh, sorry, there's a question just popped into me box. John Shuttleworth, John.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Just in Appendix B within the audit report, where there's a risk of valuations being under or overestimated due to COVID-19, would it be fair to say that people might have underestimated as opposed to overestimated, given the scenario we're living in at the minute?
That's probably fair to say. It's just because of the market uncertainty in general that was caused by COVID-19. It was just sort of recognising that there was an uncertainty, but it's not necessarily one way or the other. So I think that is fair to say it could have been the case, yeah.
Okay.
If I can just come up, should that be reflected in the report, do you think, or not? Because it'll either be one way or another way. It won't be both ways, like.
Sorry, what do you mean, Councillor? I think because it currently does say that it may be over or understated.
Well, if it's either one thing or another thing, it won't be either under or over. It'll be either under or over. You know what I mean? Are you with us?
He's saying that it can't be both at the same time, and before the report got put together, then it should have been clear whether it was going to be under or over. Is that right, John?
That's correct.
Yeah, can I ask a question on that point? Is that just not the cautionary thing, worst case scenario you would do?
Yeah, it's sort of just recognising that there was uncertainty in the markets, but whether the uncertainty went one way or the other, there's no way to easily tell. So it could have been one way, it could be the other. There's no certain way of telling for certain which way it went.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. The question I wanted to ask, I'm not even sure, I don't really think it's your question. You mentioned about the committee members' declarations of interest.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know what was the story with them, and do we need to be more efficient in sort of collecting them and forcing people to fill them in? I don't know. Or is it something completely different?
No, I think that was the gist of it. So for the work we do in that area, we look at the declarations that are signed by yourselves as the pension fund committee members, and then also the audit committee members. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember off. I'm not sure if it says in the report. It says we had 5 instances where these forms were not completed. I'm not sure what the split was in terms of audit committee and pension fund committee. But yeah, the management response, I can't remember who provided that response, but it was acknowledged that the process for gathering them would potentially be improved and to make sure that none are missed.
Okay, thanks for that, Daniel. Does anybody else have any questions for Daniel? If not, do we agree to note the report?
Move the report, Chairman.
Thank you.
Agree.
If we move on to item number 9, the pension fund accounts for the year 31st of March 2020. Beverly?
Thanks, Chair. So this report presents the audited pension fund accounts for the year ending 31st of March 2020, which have been approved in line with statutory deadlines and the Council's constitution. So, as Durham County Council are the administering authority for the pension fund, we are required to include the pension fund accounts within the Council's statement of accounts. So members will probably already know there's a two-stage process for approving and publish the annual accounts, and in a normal year I would have reported the final set of accounts to members at the September Pension Fund Committee. However, due to COVID-19, the statutory deadlines for approval and publication of the accounts were extended. So rather than have the draft accounts approved by the 31st of May and the final or audited set of accounts approved by the 31st of July, the deadlines for this year only, I believe, were the 31st of August for the draft and the 30th of November for the final set of accounts. So the Corporate Director of Resources approved the Council's draft accounts for 1920 on the 12th of June, and they were subsequently published on the Council's website. They were then subject to scrutiny by our external auditors, Mazars, as Daniel has gone through. So during the audit, there were a small number of minor amendments made to the notes in the pension fund accounts as set out in the report that Daniel's just presented to you. Nothing major, as he said. We added narrative to reference the uncertainty caused by COVID-19 on the valuation of the fund's unquoted assets. And we made minor amendments to two of the notes in the account following the accounts to ensure we fully comply with the CIPFA Code of Practice on local authority accounting. So the pension fund accounts have to include two core financial statements: the fund account, which is an income and expenditure statement for the year, and the net asset statement, which is a summary of the assets available at the year end to meet benefit payments. We also have to include notes to the accounts which provide more detail behind the figures contained within these two core statements. I don't intend to go through the accounts in detail due to the size and nature of the contents, but just want to highlight the key financial information reported within there. So the net assets reduced by £196 million to £2.786 billion during the year. This decrease is mainly due to the impact the financial markets had on the fund's investments as at the 31st of March 20, which resulted in a reduction in asset value of £186 million. There was a net withdrawal of £24 million due to benefits paid to pensioners exceeding contributions received, and management expenses were £16 million for the year. All of these were slightly offset by investment income received in year of £31 million. So as well as being included in the Council Statement of Accounts, the pension fund accounts are also included in the pension fund annual report and accounts. I presented the key highlights of the 1920 annual report and accounts to employees and members in attendance at the annual meeting of the pension fund held on the 5th of November. And the full annual report and accounts was published on the Council's website on the 16th of November and is available for anyone to read now. So to summarise, I'm pleased to report that the accounts received a clean bill of health from Mazars, who provided an unqualified opinion on the pension fund accounts for 1920, and that all of the deadlines relating to this year's accounts and the pension fund annual report have been met. I'm happy to take questions now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Beverly. Do we have any questions? It doesn't look like it. Before we agree to hopefully note the report, just like to say thanks to everybody from in the team for getting things together as fast as they did, which was way before the reporting deadlines. Well done to everybody. In hopefully circumstances we'll not find ourselves in again, and well done. Can we agree to note the report, committee? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 10, which is the Borderster Coast Pensions Partnership Responsible Investment Policy. Paul Cooper.
Thanks, Chair. So the Borderster Coast Pension Partnership RI Responsible Investment Policy and Corporate Governance and Voting Guidelines. These were originally developed back in 2017 at the beginning of the Pooling project, with input from all 11 partner funds, all 12 at the time, now 11. And as part of that approach, we agreed to an annual review of the RI approach at Borderster Coast. So the committee has previously approved the policies the updated policies annually, which Board of Coast review in conjunction with their engagement partner, Robeco. At the Pension Fund Committee training session on the 27th of November, Board of Coast's Head of Responsible Investment, Jane Firth, presented the progress to date in the responsible investment area at Board of Coast, as well as an overview of the approach taken by Board of Coast. As such, I don't intend to walk through the whole report with members, as Jane went in some detail at the training session, but I would highlight a few sections. In paragraph 10. It just reiterates in headline terms Board of Coast's approach, which is to engage with companies to try and make change for the better, as opposed to a blanket policy of divestment from particular sectors. So Board of Coast favour engagement. But I would also highlight paragraph 11, where Board of Coast are now proposing to vote against the chairs of companies who don't make enough progress in the climate change sphere, in particular, as measured by TPI, which is the Transition Pathway Initiative, which is a kind of industry standard way of assessing companies' strategy towards climate change. And also I'd highlight paragraph 13, which also is a forward-looking view from Board of Coast in the areas that they'll be looking at next year during 2021, including spinning out the climate change policy into a standalone policy, reiterating Board of Coast's commitment in that area, and the other activities that Board of Coast are engaging in. So unless there's any immediate questions, the recommendations of the report would be to provide any comments on RI at Board of Coast and the policies that they've developed, to note and approve the RI policy in corporate governance and voting guidelines policy, and to authorise the Corporate Director of Resources to amend the fund's investment strategy statement, the ISS, to reflect the principles of Board of Coast's RI policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul.
I have a question, Chair.
2 seconds, Jim. I've got a question from Owen Temple, and then I'll bring Jim in next. Owen.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to welcome this for a start, because I think that as a committee it's been quite difficult for us to take a very deep interest in responsible investment from within the committee. So having a dedicated department seems to me to be an advance. But I just wanted to check with yourself and with the pension manager whether you feel that we have a sufficient capacity to influence it in the future if we should want to, in terms of, for instance, a move towards disinvestment if that was felt appropriate.
Paul, do you want to come in and then I'll follow up?
Yeah, of course, happy to, Chair. Yeah, it's a very good question, and I think just to reflect on your first point, Councillor, about the department at Board of Coast, it clearly is a welcome addition to have a head of responsible investment and a responsible investment team that partner funds collectively benefit from, that probably couldn't be resourced by any of the individual 11 partner funds. So that's a real benefit. As to influencing the direction of travel, I think, yes, we will have influence on that. And I think Board of Coast, in respect of climate change, for example, spinning out that policy to a standalone policy next year, I think there's a real opportunity for the committee when we talked at the training session about revisiting RI in June of next year. I think at that point it's probably a good opportunity to provide feedback to Board of Coast to influence the direction of travel. Of course, there is the element of a collective responsible investment policy. This is a policy where Board of Coast are managing assets on behalf of all 11 partner funds. So it would be very difficult to expect Board of Coast to have a wholesale change that accommodates simply one fund. But certainly, I think we do have that opportunity to influence. And I think having some feedback from our session in June, as proposed by the chair at training, I think that'd be really good to feed back to the pool to influence the direction of travel.
Thanks, Paul. Just from my point of view, very quickly, a couple of things. The first one is that that we know that everybody else who's in the pool are talking about the same things, maybe on different levels, maybe for a different amount of time. So everybody's talking about the same things. Whether they all go in the same direction or not probably depends on what investments they already have, how well it's doing, and how quickly they can sort of get out of them, I suppose. But the second thing is that we have heard a couple of times in the meetings from South Yorkshire. South Yorkshire are the sort of furthest forward of the councils who were on the BCPP, and they seem to be pushing towards their goal. I'm not quite sure how they're going to get towards their goal without the rest of us being dragged along, but they're looking to disinvest from any fossil fuels by 2030. But everybody else is, like I say, everybody else is in a different place. Jim, can I bring you in next?
Yes, Chair. Mine's a climate change question. You mentioned voting against the chairs and the boards for on climate change issues. This begs the question from me: will Border Coast set out their own climate change policy? You've just mentioned there Yorkshire's might be different to Durham's. Some may be far more draconian than others. Border Coast are going to have a fixed point. They can't just sort of, I wouldn't have thought, turn up at a meeting and vote all the chairs out and everything just because they've got that sounds like a climate issue. I would have thought they'd have to have a fixed point that they would take to that meeting. And where would they get it from? Would they make their own, or would they have to have a full discussion with all the partners and make sure it's as one? Thank you.
From my point of view, Paul, I know Paul wants to come in here as well, but from my point of view, what's happening at the minute is Okay, Paula, Andy, can you answer Jim's question, please?
Shall I go? I was in
please,
motion
Andy.
anyway. Thank you, Councillor. It was, I was referring to page 117 of the pack, and this was just to really try and bring out the fact that obviously we have got 11 different partner funds who've all got their own unique voices and views on the likes of responsible investment, and it's a very passionate, important area for a lot of councils at the moment, which is highly understandable. So the way it would work currently, where they differ, is that we try to develop policies in terms of responsible investment, how we oversee companies, how we vote as well, from a pool perspective. So we try and get the consensus as much as possible, and indeed that's the process that we go through over the course of 6 months each year, to try and develop what's best practice in Robeco, our third-party subject matter experts' views. We also look at best practice in the market, and then we take it through the various governance loops. So, of course, we look at it internally, we look at it with the officer group, we go through it with the board and the joint committee, featuring chairs and officers as well, to try and get something that everyone can get on board with. But then on top of that, as we've noted, some partner funds are going to continue to push a little further along this spectrum, and their own RI policy may include things that don't necessarily feature within the Borders Coast policy as well. And we can't enforce anything upon them, and nor would we want to either. So there's always going to be additional things that feature in there. Now, I suppose the question as to how that pans out in practice going forwards. And we've noted that South Yorkshire have set their ambitious goals of looking at carbon neutrality by about 2030. Now, some of this is still going to be a work in progress. I believe South Yorkshire is still doing the analysis themselves to try and come up with a plan as to how they might put that into practice. So as yet, we don't know what their thoughts and process is going to be on that front, nor how that's going to feed into our RI policy going forward, or indeed the way that they'd like us to manage investments. There's certainly things that we'll need to continue to discuss, which is what we will do across the pool on an ongoing basis. I suppose one further point worth bringing out, and this is more voting than actual investment approach, is that if the partner fund does wish to vote their holding in a particular stock differently to how we are choosing to do so at the pool fund level, then that is something that's well within their rights to do. So as long as they give us sufficient notice, rationale for doing so, then we can vote individual holdings along that are aligned with a particular partner fund's views.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah, cool.
Just quickly, I was thinking more along the lines of, I know all the different councils will have different ethical policies, and I know you have a whole department looking at those kinds of things. But I'm thinking at the other side of the scale, the managers, the board of directors, when you turn up, could be turning up to vote them out of a job. What I'm thinking in terms of when they're looking at ethical and climate change things, it can't be a swimming about policy when there's 11 people involved, or 12 altogether, and I'm thinking from their point of view, they would have to understand a fixed policy that they could actually work on, so that it isn't swimming from here to there because the chair of that partner is saying different to that party. You're going to have a fixed point if you're going to have an agreement that you're going to just turn up and vote them out. So it's a two-sided thing. They need to know, as well as we need to know, what that fixed point is.
You referred to, just so check that I'm answering the right question. You're referring to sort of the management of companies that we've invested in. Yeah,
well yes, they would have to know that they have to be able to go to places when they can say that there's climate change issues here that we have to take stock of, or we can have somebody coming and voting against our policies or whatever, how we work. So it's best that they have something solid to play with rather than something that swims about.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I mean, from a Borders to Coast perspective, our voting policy and the engagement as well, which is an absolutely key part of this, is driven by our policies that you see in the pack today, aside from, you know, these perhaps one-off cases where a partner fund may wish to vote their own holding independently. And I think from an individual company perspective, we always believe this is why we don't divest. We always believe it's better to engage with companies first. So if they're setting certain proposals out, resolutions of how they're going to get paid, how they're going to develop the business going forward, and we don't agree with them, and it's not in line with that policy, then our third-party providers, Robeco, will be engaging with them on such matters as well. And we expect the same from any external managers that we appoint to. So there should be a clear view coming through, and we wouldn't expect by any stretch of the imagination, we're not doing something, I wouldn't say, that is absolutely radical within the asset management world. You know, our policies on RI are not going to be radically different from the likes of Legal & General, some of the other big managers out there, especially some of the pooled ones. So they'll be getting the same sort of engagement on certain topics and voting against management where we believe it's justified and other managers believe it's justified as well. So I think they should be getting clear voices coming through on those more contentious matters.
Okay, thank you. I think it's an important point. I just wanted to make the point. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to come in or should I move on?
I think Andy's covered everything I would have wanted to answer there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. John Lethbridge, did you want to come in?
Simply to say, Chair, that I think, to repeat, we do need a common purpose. And that's what I want to feel that we're looking towards. We may well have disagreements along the way, but we have to have some unity of purpose here. I think Owen's question initially was a good one. You know, it was teasing out this what could be a problem, and Jim has touched upon it too. I would simply to repeat, I would expect to see a commonality of purpose in terms of policies here for Border to Coast. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Are we all happy to agree the recommendations in the report?
Agreed, Charlie. Move the recommendations.
Great.
Okay, thank you very much. If we move on to item number 11, which is the implementation of the exit policy, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. And again, this was a report that members were provided training on at our session on the 27th of November. So hopefully the contents are now familiar. But just to briefly reflect that in May 2018, government regulations introduced the concept of exit credits within the local government pension scheme, and that eliminated the asymmetrical position that was in place before. So it's always been the case that where an employer exits the pension fund and that employer, their section of the fund is in deficit, then that employer would be expected to make good on the deficit upon exit. The change in 2018 introduced the other side, where if an employer exits the fund in surplus, then they could reasonably expect a payout, an exit, which is termed an exit credit. The pension fund was required to reflect its approach to exits, and as part of the finalisation of the fund and strategy statement, an exit policy was adopted, and that was in March 2020. Just to highlight some key points to members, paragraph 9 highlights the considerations that would be taken into account upon an employer exiting. And when we talk about an employer exiting the fund, an exit occurs when the last active member at an individual employer leaves the fund. That would trigger an exit, and we would carry out an exit valuation. And if we find upon carrying out the exit valuation, which will be done on a low risk gilts basis, if there still remained a surplus on that basis, then we would need to take into consideration what we do about any exit credit. We went through these at the training session, but paragraph 9 highlights those considerations. And I would also draw attention to paragraph 10, that after those considerations are taken into account, the value of any surplus will be absolutely capped to the value of any contributions made by that exiting employer. Essentially, that means that no employer can take out more than they've put in very simple terms. So members are asked to note this report as well as the exit policy that's set out in Appendix 1, and also to authorise the Corporate Director of Resources going forward to make a determination on the amount of any exit credit payable to an exiting employer, done in line with the fund's exit policy as set out in Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Do we have any questions on the report?
Move the report, Chairman.
Okay, so we're happy to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 12, any other business? I don't have any other business. Item number 13, exclusion of the press and public. Can we have a mover for the exclusion of the press and public, please?
Move the resolution, Chairman.
Second.
Thank you. That brings to the end the business for the public part of the meeting. And before the broadcast end, I'd like to thank those members of the public and media who have watched this meeting, and I'd also like to thank the members of the committee for putting up with the three meetings that we had. So if everybody can remain nice and quiet for the next 30 seconds, we'll get the public part of the meeting closed down. Thanks very much, everybody.